I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Thanks for joining me today. I am joined by two very special guests. We have Andy Powers and Scott Paul from Taylor Guitars here. It's great to see you guys.
It's great to see you, Mitch. I wish we could
Yeah,
be in person, but hey, we'll take what we can get, right?
that's right. It's well, at least we have the wonders of Zoom to help us help us do an interview here and talk about things because I really wanted to sit down and chat with you guys because Taylor's doing such great things and making such great efforts in the world of sustainability and preserving tonewoods and being conscious of the resources and things that are going on. That's led to some new guitars and some new initiatives and things. And so I really wanted to chat with you guys about that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting because in the last, I don't know, I guess a couple of years, it's become somewhat of a hot topic for a lot of people where there's more attention being trained on this topic than probably ever before. But the reality is this has been a great concern for us for quite a long time. I mean, going back not 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, but 20 years and more, because our very livelihood is wrapped up in work building instruments with these materials. So when you go to use something, you want to be paying attention to what is its condition? Where is it coming from? What's it like? How is it being harvested? What does the future of it look like? It's not really, when we think about buying wood, this isn't a buying relationship. This is more like a chef and a farmer working together. This is a harvesting relationship. We want to see what the next year's harvest is going to be like. We want to see what the conditions of the crops are like. And more that's led us into direct participation ourselves. So yeah, it's a near and dear topic to us.
Yeah, yeah. So what is the current state of the union, if you will? How are we sitting today with tone woods and availability? And I know there's some endangered types of woods and things. And where are we at currently?
Well, I'll say my part and then I'll turn that over to Scott as well because he's got some valuable insights to weigh in. But the reality in short, it's never been harder. It's never been harder than it is now, and it's never going to get easier because the reality is there is more demand on woods. Now, what does that look like? Well, it means that certain materials that we've relied on in the past may not be available in the same way as they have been. But that's okay. It's okay because we can work with other materials. We can design new instruments around what we do have available. For years, decades, centuries, instrument builders have behaved like hunter-gatherers. You go out into a forest, you get what you need, and then you bring it back to your workshop and you're going to make something out of it. Well, it became apparent to us that we're stepping into the age where we have to behave like farmers. At a certain point, there's just not enough to act like a hunter-gatherer. You got to go propagate these materials so that you can have them for future generations. Because we do love using wood, we do love building instruments out of, but we want to do that in a responsible way.
Yeah, Mitch, I'll just add to that. I agree with everything Andy said. For some 200 years, people have sourced forest products with little forethought. You shut your eyes and you reached into the global grab bag and you got the species and the qualities and at the price point that you needed to make it work, and everything was fine. Well, with almost 8 billion people on the planet and with forests cover shrinking around the planet, it's becoming a game of musical chairs. So it is getting harder to get the quality, the quantity, and the price point that you never had to think about for many hundreds of years. But additionally, the other thing that's happening is the world is reacting to this. So the kind of global governmental infrastructure that's going to decide how humanity is going to manage forests in an era of climate change and regulate the forest products trade, these rules of the road are being negotiated and put into place in real time. So for a long time, it was just supply and demand. You bought what you needed. Now this infrastructure is being laid on top of the forest products trade. And companies like Taylor Guitars really has to pay attention to the changing rules of the road for buying wood to make musical instruments.
Right. And, honestly, we're happy to do it because just like this isn't something that's being done to us. We encourage this. We feel that there is intrinsic value in a forest. There's intrinsic value in trees. There's value for them to grow. There's value for them to be planted. There's also value for them to be harvested when the time is appropriate. Now, when we look at that, we think, well, of course, these things should be protected. They should have regulations. They should have rules put in place so that it's not a free-for-all. We want to help understand what those are and also behave in a responsible, reasonable way to leave these forests in better condition than the way we found them.
Right, right. So is it a situation where really beautiful figured woods are rarer than non-figured woods, or is it just exotic woods that are in peril, or is it mahogany and spruce that we feel like we can get anywhere?
Well, that's an interesting distinction because, in the instrument building world, we tend to look at like the creme de la creme of wood product, right? It's like the perfect, flawless slice of the most scarce material, right? That's how we think of it. And oftentimes that's not far from the truth. But wherever you go in the world and whatever species that you're looking at, they're all unique. They all have a different set of criteria. They're harvested in different ways. The forests are managed in different ways. The outlook for the different species are unique. Every one of these is a unique set of individual circumstances. And so there's not really a one-size-fits-all approach to call it protecting and using tonewoods. It's very much what I think of as a local issue, where in one part of the world, you have to behave like a local. You have to know what those rules are. You have to know what the condition of that forest and that species and that outlook is so that you can participate in a responsible, healthy way.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd simply add, Mitch, that it's a mistake. A lot of people look at this as like a tropical issue. The
Right.
tropical forests are in trouble. The temperate forests are under equal stress. And a lot of species that musical instrument makers have traditionally accessed are temperate species. So we really have to look at this as a global forest issue and not, tropical or exotic. Exotic, it's also in the eye of the beholder. Ebony is a firewood if you live in Cameroon.
Right.
Right.
Mahogany is a firewood if you live in Guatemala. So it's a global issue, and we're all in the same boat.
Right. Now, I know Taylor has a number of initiatives that you've had going for a while and some newer ones that you're working on as well. A couple of those that I want to call out and talk about is you've really made an effort and an initiative toward preserving the ebony resources. Talk to us about that.
Right. So Ebony started it started as a supplier. For a long time we had bought ebony and went, well, we'll just buy ebony and we'll use it in every grade and every way that it comes. That's, the prevailing philosophy is use what the forest gives you. Right. So if ebony comes in and it looks like this, fine, use it. If it looks like that, fine, use it, as long as it's going to make a structurally great, beautiful guitar. Okay. And so an opportunity came up years ago, more than 10 years ago now, that the mill that we were getting wood from, or that our supplier was getting it from, needed to change hands. So we started researching that and looking at it, and come to find out, oh, you can't unknow something once you've learned it, right? And so we decided, well, the only way that we can really be assured that the very best thing is happening in this forest and at this mill is for us to do it ourselves. That's the way that we can ensure this is going to be done at a very high level It will keep out a bad operator that might also want to look at this resource and exploit it. And so we went into that. Well, that was a tremendous step for us, tremendously difficult. It was, in my opinion, something that only Bob Taylor could do. He was the one who had the vision to do this, as well as the wherewithal and desire to do it. So at the outset, you know, Bob and I would talk about this and go, okay, well, I got the guitars covered, but what about this Ebony thing? He's like, okay, you take care of the guitars. I'm going to Africa, where I'm going to take care of this Ebony thing, and we'll talk in a few months when I come back, you know. And so a lot of what we've done, and for a number of years, is divide and conquer. To go, well, this is a massive undertaking to try this. And so a lot of these efforts that we've done, we look at it and go, well, we're in control of the guitars that we want to make. We can make a beautiful guitar. We can build a great sounding guitar. We want to use what the forest gives us. And we have permission to do that. There's nobody that's going to tell us, well, you can't use that because it's not the traditional color. Well, make it the traditional color. This is what we want to build our guitars with. And I think they're beautiful personally. So
Right.
That's what we start using. And so that a project like that, it'll stem from some practical consideration to begin with. And then it kind of grows legs, and it starts to run away and turn into this thing that we could never really even imagine what it turns into, or what it has turned into, and how much attention it's received, or the good that can be done through it. It started as simple as a couple of guitar makers wanting ebony fretboards on their guitars. That's all this started at. But now it turns into something very different, and we're proud of that. We're excited for it.
Right, that's fantastic. Right. And there's a similar initiative, I think a little bit more recent, with Koa as well. Tell us about that.
Right. Again, it's a similar, the circumstances are different, but the overall theme is very similar. It started with wanting to get some Koa wood so we could build guitars with. We've built a lot of Koa guitars over the years. We have great interest in building more guitars. It sounds great. It's tremendously beautiful. It's a wonderful wood. And it's not always that easy to get. In fact, it's never easy to get. And there was one season in particular where we couldn't get any. No logs were available, no boards were available. We just couldn't get it. And so we were trying to figure out, like, okay, well, we want some. We don't know how to get it. We don't know where to get it. It's a Hawaiian thing. I don't know anybody else who has some. Nobody's got some right now. And one of our kind of our main wood buyer sort of jokingly found a real estate listing for a piece of land in Hawaii that had some Koa trees on it. And he goes, well, how about we just buy this piece of land and get some logs that way? And, you know, Bob and I look at that and went, well, you were joking about it, but that might not be a bad idea. Okay, let's look at this. And so we started doing some research with our colleague up at Pacific Rim Tonewoods. Did some research, found out, well, it's not a bad idea. It's just not that particular slice of land, and it's not those trees, because those ones are like standing mulch. You know, there's nothing good about that. It's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And so that one thing led to another, and it led to the formation of a partnership with Steve McMinn as what we call SIGLO, which is, you know, this is the word for century. And so we look at this as a century-long project. It's a long-term forest project. And so that in that part of the world, the way it operates is you do forestry operations to maintain, to improve, to clean up older forestry initiatives that were neglected oftentimes, as well as planting future generations of Koa trees for instrument building and for other woodcraft industries. So it's in every one of these projects, there's a different set of circumstances and a different scenario and a different set of mechanisms that you need to operate, because it's going to be a local level project.
Yeah, Mitch, I'll just add briefly that in Hawaii, you know, Hawaii is the most remote island chain on the planet. and the native trees from Hawaii didn't evolve very much defense mechanisms. So when you bring in exotic animals and plants, the local flora and fauna, it's very difficult for them to survive. So a lot of the forests in Hawaii are actually on a slow trajectory of decline because they're losing the battle against a lot of invasive species. So what Taylor is doing with Pacific Rim Tonewoods is really a form of what they call stewardship contracting, where we will go in and take a select number of trees, and the money for those trees goes into a special account, and that account can only be used for things like fence building and hunting out exotics and pulling out exotic weed species. So what the value proposition is, we're walking into a forest that's gradually on a trajectory of biological decline. And by going in there and getting some wood and doing the work that we're doing, we're changing that trajectory. So in 10 years, 20 years, the forest will actually be far healthier than it's destined to be prior to our intervention.
Right. Right. It's like you look at things in the natural world, and they tend to be in a state of deterioration. Right. Forests are a good example of that. They tend to be deteriorating. And so if you look at koa, like one of the big issues there is fusarium wilt. Okay. Well, a guitar player doesn't need to know what that is, but it would be like COVID for a koa tree, right? Okay. It's something like that. It's not good. It's not good. It's not a good thing for a koa tree. And so we look at this and go, well, that means that this forest is on a slow degradation. Okay, well, let's take seed stock from trees that are growing at a certain elevation, and we'll plant those ones because those particular genetic strains tend to be resistant to this decline for this particular call it agent, this particular disease. Well, by planting a disproportionate number of those trees, you can help diversify and strengthen that forest so that it ends up in better condition than the way you found it. Another example is the form of the tree. Okay, one of the biggest invasive problems for koa trees is cattle. Cattle, wild animals, because apparently when a koa tree is young, it's just a tender little green shoot sticking up out of the ground. That's like the tasty snack for cattle. Okay, so the biggest problem is that a cow will walk over this thing, eat it all off, and then leave this little stumpy shrub of a tree. Yeah, that tree could grow for the next 50 years, but it's got terrible form because it turned into not the normal natural shape of a koa tree, but it turned into a shrub. Well, there's nothing good out of that. You're not going to build a majestic traditional Hawaiian canoe out of that. You're not going to build guitars out of that. It turned into a bush. Right. And so one of the things that you could do is build fencing. Okay, build fences and keep the cows out. It's a relatively simple thing, but that's what's needed. Those kinds of practical steps are what's needed to help preserve these forests.
Right. You guys are also working closer to home and even looking into the urban space. You've been partnering with West Coast arborists.
Right. I'll let Scott take some of that, but the genesis of the idea was, I'll say it the way that I view it. When I fly into an airport, right, you're coming in for a landing, you're in an airplane, and you look down at this big city. When you look down, you notice that there's a lot of green. There's a lot of buildings, sure, a lot of streets, but there's a lot of green. Every one of those trees was put there for a reason. They were put there for soil, to control soil erosion, for shade and cooling value, for noise barriers, for the aesthetic value, for windbreaks, all kinds of different reasons. Well, there's a huge forest that's right in our own backyard. What about those? What about those as an option? And so we started looking at that and going, well, maybe not all these trees they might not all be good for building guitars, but certainly some of them must have some interesting qualities. Let's investigate. Mm-hmm. So Scott, you take it from there because you did a lot of the initial heavy lifting on that.
Yeah, I'd say that, I've worked for some of the, prior to joining Taylor Guitars, I've worked for some of the largest environmental organizations in the world, and I worked for the White House Office on Environmental Policy. I've been in forests all over the place. I never once thought about urban forests, urban trees. And Bob and Andy asked me to look into it, and it's been like stepping through the looking glass in terms of the resource. And there is a tremendous awakening and awareness about the importance of urban trees. There's a lot of money being made available to plant trees in urban areas. The science is overwhelming that uh, urban trees are beneficial for mental health, for just general well-being. The wealthier the community, the more trees, the more disadvantaged the community, the fewer trees. And the blessing of Taylor Guitars being in Southern California is everything grows in Southern California. So therefore, everything was planted in Southern California. And we just have this cornucopia of options, because other parts of the country, there may be just one or two species and it works or it doesn't. Here in California, Andy has a huge menu of options of trees that are planted, and all living things die and trees are removed. And as more trees are being planted, that just means more throughput. More trees will reach the end of their life at a certain point. And it's just this ridiculous untapped resource. The quality of the wood that's coming out of the urban infrastructure in Southern California is phenomenal. The problem is the infrastructure is not built to capture it. It's always been seen as a waste product. So what Taylor Guitars and West Coast Arborists are doing right now, it's truly a national, and I don't say lightly, global example of two companies coming together and trying to build an infrastructure to bring value out of this wood. I'll just close by saying, honestly, it's easier and cheaper to get wood from India or Fiji, because those are very well-established supply chains, than to get wood from LA County, because there is no infrastructure to efficiently capture that wood. Now, don't get me wrong, we're doing it and we're getting better all the time, and it will get easier as the years go by. But it is truly groundbreaking, the partnership between Taylor Guitars and West Coast Arborists, and we're proving that there is enough wood, enough quality wood, to build something as delicate as an acoustic guitar and have that model sold in in countries all around the world.
Right.
These are dedicated models that are using a former waste product from city trees. That is, Andy can tell you, these are exceptional quality wood that is being made available to us.
Right. We've all heard that saying, if a tree falls in the forest, but nobody's around to hear it, did it make a sound?
Right.
Well, I can promise that when a tree falls down in the middle of an urban environment, there are a lot of people who hear it, right? A giant tree falls across a freeway, there's going to be a lot of people that pay attention to it. And so
Right.
we think about these trees in urban environments, and honestly, a lot of times they're taken out for liability reasons. They get so big, they cause damage. The roots lift up sidewalks. We've all seen what that's like. You got to watch out when you're riding your skateboard down the sidewalk. You got to watch out for those cracks, But here in Southern California, you get a tree that grows too big, and if it were to fall over in a, windstorm or something, that's a real problem. And so trees are commonly removed and replanted, and I'm glad to see when they're replanted, and they often are, because they were put there for a practical reason to begin with. And so we started looking with this, and then find out, well, how do you even go about starting this? Like right now, when a tree is taken out, most of the time, it would be ground up for mulch. So you're taking a tree, this high value wood product, and you're turning it into the wood product that you hope becomes dirt, right? It's like the least valuable wood product. And so we started looking at that going, well, how do you even do this? How do you take down a tree whole in an urban environment? Well, that's what led us to partner with West Coast Arborists, because they're managing all of the municipal trees in every city in California. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but there's this super forward-thinking company that has a database of what trees were planted, how they were maintained, where they are, all these kind of things. You go, oh, okay, now here's some guys who are, here's a company who could do something about this. They had already gone so far as to see the same value that we were imagining. Like, surely there must be some value in these trees. Maybe not all of them, but the best of the best. There's got to be something here. And so the way that project started is they have a log yard, and we went taste testing with chainsaws. And went and started going, I don't know much about a lot of these species. They're not common guitar making woods. Some of these woods I've never worked with in my life. And so it started a multi-year project of researching the structural characteristics of different woods and how they might be used, how you would create a guitar that uses the unique the unique characteristics of this wood versus that wood.
Mm-hmm. I'd just add one kind of big picture thought is, in 2008, for the first time in human history, more people live in an urban setting than a rural setting. And when you stop and think about that for a minute, that's a fairly profound moment in human history, where more people live in an urban environment than a rural environment. And I can tell you, we're not going back. The urbanization of our species is going to accelerate and be enhanced. So the importance of understanding the urban environment and making sure it's hospitable, livable, that we're greening it, it's just going to become increasingly important. And one of the things means we're going to have to manage and enhance the forest canopy. As a direct result, we're going to also have to find value in these trees at the end of their life. And companies like Taylor Guitars and companies like Room and Board, based in Minneapolis, we're really the first two companies that are leading the way and proving concept that you can create jobs and manage this resource, this unbelievable, valuable resource that is going to be increasingly important as we move forward, because we're all living in cities, and that's just not going to change.
Right. So I'm curious, Andy, you talked a little bit about the time it takes and investigating these different woods. So you find a tree, you haven't worked with it before. Is it the case where you're saying, well, I want that tree to be sonically and performance-wise like mahogany. I'm trying to find a new mahogany, or are you looking at it as, this is a fresh sound that I can bring to a guitar? Do you design the guitar around it? I guess I'm wondering how you work those new woods in.
You that's a good question, Mitch, because I go both directions with it. In a lot of times it feels like going to a farmer's market and saying, well, I have no idea what this thing is, what it tastes like, what it does, how it behaves. Let me just get some and start cooking with it, right? And so we literally started walking around in a log yard going, well, okay, I don't even know how to start narrowing down this list. So let me look at the top 20 trees that you remove by volume, and then I'll look at some physical characteristics of those to see if there's any that are of interest. Okay, what makes a tree of interest? Well, a lot of practical considerations, like, can you dry it? Will it twist and warp and do bad, crack and do all kinds of awful things as soon as you start to dry it? Well, that's not going to make a stable guitar, so that one's out. You gotta take some practical things with this. And so we start looking at identified a few different woods. Go, well, okay, these trees grow to about a reasonable size where you could get some wood out of it. They have what appear to be good drying characteristics. Okay, this one has a medium density, this one has this. So, you start kind of filtering through all these little criteria. And then we start going through traditional woodworking steps to learn about them. So like I said, first you take this slab of a tree, a giant cookie, looks like, oversized pencil or something. Go, okay, well, can I cut some boards out of it? Okay, you cut some boards out of it. Now, can I dry them? Will they crack? Will they warp? Will they bend? Will they twist? What'll happen? Will it case harden? Will the water come out of it? Will it not? Will it be stable? Does it fluctuate? Does it bend? Does it do? And you just start working with it. And then once you narrow down, well, this one species, this works pretty good. I could do something with it. Now let's think about what sort of qualitative characteristics does it have? What does it sound like? How could I use it? Is this a wood that should make a fretboard? Is this a wood that should make the top of a guitar? Is this the wood that should make the back and sides of a guitar? What do I do with it? Because a guitar, it's never just one thing, or it's rarely just one thing. It's this mix of all of these unique pieces that each have a unique job in the instrument. They all have a role to fill. They have these unique characteristics. You want something hard and dense and abrasion resistant for a fretboard because your fingers are all over it all the time. For the top of a guitar, you have a different set of criteria. For the back of the guitar, you have a different set of criteria. You want to use the materials in the places where they're most appropriate. And so in the case of the first, call it urban harvested wood that we used, the chamois ash, well, that one was the first because it was the easiest, frankly. Mm-hmm. It was so close in so many physical characteristics to great mahogany. Well, that just made it a shoe-in. It's like the wood that just wants to please you. You can make backs and sides out of it, and it works great. You could build tops of guitars out of it. It works good. You could do all kinds of stuff with it. It's got that quality where you can dry it, you can saw it, you can glue it, you can sand it, you can finish it. It's a very practically speaking, it's a wonderful wood to work with. Well, that makes it easy to design a guitar that sounds good with it. And so a lot of these materials, you're not so much looking at it as a traditional wood replacement, but looking at it first as what are its unique characteristics and how can I work with that?
Right. One of the first woods that one of the woods I've been seeing come up in conversations about the upcoming and new Taylor guitars is red ironbark. Right. Can you tell us a little bit about that type of wood and how you discovered that and what you're using it for?
That was one of the woods that came out of our first taste testing. It's a in some ways you would think of it as an exotic wood. It came from Australia region initially and was planted here in California quite frequently. It's a unique wood in almost every way that I could name. It's a tremendously dense wood. It has a density that's more in keeping of a rosewood, ebony kind of family. It's ultra hard, ultra dense, but it has some unique qualities that make it especially well suited for guitars. One of them is that it's very stable when it's dry. You can dry it. You can dry it without cracking it, and it becomes very stable. And it has an unbelievably smooth texture. It's a very, very fine grain material, which is unique for something that hard. So initially, when I started looking at it, I was thinking, well, maybe this is a fretboard wood. Maybe this is a good wood for bridge. And newsflash, it is. It's not inherently a dark color, so I'll think about that some more. But when I realized that we could dry it and saw it and have it be stable, I thought, oh, I'm good. Here, try this as a back and side wood. Let me see what else I can do. Can I bend it? Can I, and come to find out, man, this stuff is awesome. It sounds great. It's like this really unique quality of a rosewood or an ebony-like wood because of its density, and yet it has kind of like the mid-range presence of mahogany or that clarity. And so I started building a couple of guitars with it and tuning some back voicings and things to make it really work great. Man, this stuff was an amazing wood. It's a eucalyptus family species. And eucalyptus family family tree is very big. There's a lot of different versions. And so you have some that are known as gum eucalyptus trees. There's a bunch of different types of those, and they have smooth bark. The red ironbark is actually named for the appearance of its bark. It looks like wrought iron. It's deeply fissured, real dark, real rough looking. But it's a really unique, special material. And the first guitar I built with it, I was just floored by the sound of it. It was remarkable in a lot of different ways.
Right, that's fascinating. So will we be seeing some of these woods in upcoming models from Taylor? Anything you can let us in on?
Yeah, certainly. We're excited to be launching our 500 series guitars. We're relaunching it, but now with red ironbark on the back and sides. Now, this is a particularly interesting step for me as a guitar maker, because you're looking at a series of guitars that has been a staple in Taylor's lineup for a very long time, right? I mean, it was a quintessential spruce and mahogany guitar for the longest time. We've done some cedar top over mahogany, and I love that. That's great. And we're using mahogany in other parts of our lineup. So I had, places to serve that. But I looked at this and went, well, this is a perfect opportunity to put one of these woods in place, not as a special edition or something like that, but as an addition to our lineup where it has a long-term outlook, it has genuine musical value in its own unique voicing, and it gives us an opportunity to start leaning on more of these forestry models. So that'll be a particularly exciting thing to roll out in the coming weeks, months, years.
Yeah, I think as we're I know as we're shooting this video, I think we're just a little ways off from that coming out. So by the time you see this video, that'll be a reality, and we'll all get
certainly hope so.
Check these guitars out. That's very exciting. So you said something, and it caught my attention. I was kind of curious about. You mentioned that sometimes you're looking at these woods and you think this would make a great fretboard or great bridge, but it's really not dark. I'm curious how much that affects working with these woods, the player perception of what you're getting with the guitar when you expect a dark ebony bridge and it's not a dark ebony bridge. How does that affect players?
Well, I think it matters because, like it or not, we're not truly going to evaluate a guitar based on just its playability or just its sound. I mean, that's somewhat of a lofty sort of perspective that a player might take. Say, well, I only am concerned with the tone. Well, yeah, okay, that's wonderful. I want it to look like a guitar. I think when guitars are pretty, I think they're fun to look at. They're fun to put on a wall. They're fun to pick up out of the case and put it on and go, man, this is neat. And so one of the guidance that I enjoy as a guitar maker, having a background with traditional instruments and instruments from every era, is I like seeing the slow evolution of an instrument form. I appreciate what guitars looked like 100 or more years ago. I appreciate what they looked like 50 years ago. I appreciate what they looked like 20 years ago. And so I don't want to do anything that's bizarre, that's jarring, that doesn't feel right as a guitar maker, as a designer. I want a guitar that looks cohesive. Right? I want it to look a way that is commensurate with its sound, with its playability, with the feel. Like the way that a guitar feels in my hands, it will draw a certain playing style out of me. And I want the sounds that come out of that guitar to also fit that same aesthetic. I want the guitar to look like that same aesthetic. It has to be like a unique, cohesive piece to really contribute to the musical experience. So if I look at an acoustic guitar, let's say imagine a very traditional form. Let's pick on a dreadnought for a minute. Imagine a dreadnought shaped guitar and the fretboard was made from maple. That just feels off, right? It just feels weird. Physically, it would work great. It would sound fine. It would work fine. No problems. It just doesn't seem right. And so what you would see typically, if somebody wants to use maple for a fretboard on a traditional dreadnought type of guitar, they're going to stain it. They'll put a dye in that maple fretboard. They might torify it so that it turns a dark color by roasting or temperature change or something like that. But as a community of guitar players, we understand what this form is, and I don't want to deviate radically from it in any one big step.
Right, right. I think we have, I see much more acceptance of fresh woods, new takes on different things. I remember, I think the first time I saw a Sapele guitar was probably a Taylor. However many years ago, Taylor started using Sapele, and I think it was a 200 series or 300 series.
Right.
And, at the time, that was like, wow, this is not mahogany. And
Right.
now it's a much more common, it's much more, you see it all the time, and it's used by a variety of makers and things. And so as time goes on, our tastes evolve and we become educated about some of these different things. I think it's really exciting. It's really fun to watch.
It is. I think as a guitar player and a builder, I think it's very exciting because all these are new flavors. They're going to make new sounds. They're fresh sounds. They're familiar enough that they don't alienate me. They don't alienate my ears. And so we have a lot of permission to do that. But at the same time, you don't want to abuse that because I have an understanding of what I want from that playing experience. So it's somewhat of a balance point that we want to keep.
Right, right. Well, I think it's wonderful the steps Taylor is taking to be responsible stewards of the resources that we have available. And I know some of these are long-term projects. You don't plant a tree and then harvest it the next year. It takes a little longer than that. There's
Yeah, if you're looking for a get-rich-quick scheme, this is not it. But it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done.
right.
Just because let's call it a return on that investment, just because it may not even happen within our lifetimes, doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done. In fact, there was kind of, I forget where it came from, but there was an old proverb of some sort that said, I think it was Latin kind of a thing, that said, a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they will never sit under.
Yeah.
And I think that is a perfectly stated way for us to express what we're trying to accomplish. We want to leave things in better condition than the way we found them while doing the work that we love, which is building guitars.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we love that approach, and of course, we're all about conserving resources and being responsible here at Sweetwater as well, with all the recycling and all the local kind of things we use for our construction and all that stuff. So we love seeing it, and you guys are certainly leading the way in the industry, one of the leaders as far as preserving those resources for us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Absolutely. And thanks for your time today. Appreciate you guys sitting down with us and chatting about it. What's really an important topic. If we don't have Tonewoods, we don't have guitars. So it's vital work. And I've said it a few times now, but we appreciate it. Thank you.
Our pleasure, Mitch.
Yeah, great to see you guys. Thanks so much.